Welcome to the Latino podcast, where we discuss the intersection of law and our Latino communities with legal, political, and community leaders and visionaries. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Latino, where we discuss the intersection of law and our Latino communities. Today's podcast is brought to you, as always, by your sponsors at Gomez Trial Attorneys, one of our nation's largest Latino law firms. We provide legal services for victims of civil rights violations, personal injury, and employment discrimination and other cases. Today we have with us a really cool guest. I'm very excited to introduce her to you. She really is what we were saying off camera, kind of a boots on the ground community leader. You know, she and her group are affecting the lives of an enormous number of families here in San Diego, Latino communities, our Latino families, you know, kids, people needing help. So without further ado, it's my great privilege to introduce to you Liz Ramírez, who is the CEO and president of the Chicano Federation. Thank you for being with us, Liz.
No, gracias. Thank you, John, for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. So what we like to do is kind of talk a little bit with our guests about where they're from, where they grew up. So tell us about your background.
Yeah, so I grew up in the frontera, in the border of Mexicali and Imperial Valley. I lived in Mexicali until I was 5 years old, and then my family immigrated into the United States, and I grew up in El Centro. So I lived in El Centro until I was 18, and that's when I moved to beautiful San Diego.
I love it. And so, you know, I know that we have listeners from across the country. The Imperial Valley is, or Imperial County is the county to the east of us. And that whole Calexico, Mexicali, El Centro community is really as much of a transnational community as you can really think. Everybody, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like everybody's got family on both sides over there.
Right, yes. I grew up going every weekend to see my abuelitas in Mexicali, crossing the border, you know, frequently. That's what life was.
Yes. And so, you know, you went to high school out there, right?
Yes.
Where'd you graduate high school?
Central Union High School.
I love it. And what about the boxer out there, the heavyweight boxer? Like, do you know that guy? I can't remember his name.
Oh, yes. You know, he's friends of some of my friends.
Yeah. John Ruiz, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a very famous guy from out there. So tell us about like your parents. You know, I know that you matriculated, came over here to San Diego to attend UCSD, which is a really tough school to get into, very academic. And so tell us about your parents and, you know, the influence they had on you to cause you to be such a success story.
Yeah, you know, both of my parents were born in Mexicali, and my parents have always just worked so much and so hard to give a better life for me and my two younger siblings. And they were really my pillars, the ones that always taught me that education was key. And so from very young, I knew I was going to go to college. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I knew that I was going to be the first in my family to go to college because they knew that education was the key to breaking barriers. They were always very, very supportive and, you know, always encouraged me to study hard, to work hard. And it was because of their unconditional support that I was able to leave and go to college, even though that was scary times, especially for my father. You know, I'm the only woman and girl in his eyes, right? And the oldest. So he had a little bit of trouble letting go. But at the end of the day, my family has always been very supportive.
I love it. And so, you know, when you moved out here to come to school at UCSD, did your parents like drive you out and move you in, that kind of thing?
Yeah, they did. And actually, it was very interesting because my dad, even though he was always very supportive of me going to college, when it came down to me receiving all those big envelopes, he got really scared. And so he wanted me to stay in Imperial Valley. And I remember, back then I was 18 years old and just crying all the time because I wanted to go away to college. And I remember going to my local community college. And I think this is when I really started seeing the inequities, right? Especially in the Latino community. I went to my community college and I said, okay, I want to enroll, as a freshman. And they told me, okay, what is your major going to be? And I said, psychology. They said, okay, your first year, you're not going to be eligible to take any math or English courses because they're so heavily impacted. And I knew that math and English were prerequisites to all of my psychology classes. So I knew that my first year, I was going to already be set up behind, right? And that's why I knew I needed to leave the valley. Now things have changed and there's more resources, but back then there was very little resources in our communities, and still our communities continue to struggle. So that's where my eyes opened of the lack of equity in education, and I knew that I wanted to do something to change that.
I love it. And so, tell us about how were your teachers in high school? Were they supportive of this idea that you were going to go off to college, or, were some of them kind of, hey, stay in your lane over here, don't get too crazy? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was very blessed to have very, very wonderful teachers that pushed me to go to college and that believed in my dreams and that believed that I could do it. And particularly, I remember an English teacher that I had multiple years in high school. And I would go with him during passing periods or after school to talk to him about my plans. And as I was applying, I would tell him, I got accepted into San Diego State. I got accepted into, UCLA. I got accepted into UCSD. And he really helped me narrow my choice, right? Which was great. And I also remember a counselor. And to me, that counselor really changed my life because I was navigating going and being a first generation, college student. I was completely lost. I didn't know about financial aid or scholarships. And my counselor, I think that was assigned to me, I think saw that I was just such a great student and achieving that she said, oh, I don't need to care about Liz, right? I don't need to worry about Liz. She's got it. But I really didn't know all of the resources that were there. And I remember, growing up, I had a migrant counselor that was particularly working with migrant students. And I went to her. And at that point, I was no longer in her caseload, but I said, Miss Felix, I need your help. Can you please help me? And she was the one that really shared resources and support and scholarships. And it was because of her that I was able to go to college. And I remember saying, I want to be like Miss Felix. I want to help and I want to bridge those gaps. And I want to bring resources to students so that they don't have to struggle as much as I did.
Amazing. So I wonder if Miss Felix is still out there. Maybe she ends up listening to this, but that's really an example of how, a person, caring about the community, wanting to give back, looking out for the next generation of successful leaders, change your life.
Right.
And as a consequence, has changed the lives of thousands of people through your reach.
Right.
So even back then you were thinking, hey, I want to make a difference here. I want to help, my people. Then you go over to junior college out in the valley and you're like, hey, maybe my people aren't getting all the resources and access educationally. And then you come over here to UCSD.
Yeah.
And so what's going on? You're here in La Jolla with all these super smart kids. Like, how was that?
Yeah, I mean, that was such a challenge, right? I think growing up in Imperial Valley, I was in my little bubble, right? Where the majority of us were Latino and the majority of us spoke Spanish. The majority of us grew up going on both sides of the border. And then coming to San Diego, I felt like a little island, right? I remember my psychology classes were fairly large. There were about 400 seats in a lecture hall, and I remember feeling like I was the only one that looked like me. And I really struggled. I struggled because because what I thought my dad, right, the fear of disappointing him and maybe even saying, "Yeah, you're right. I wasn't ready for college just yet." Or the university, the fear of letting them down. And I kept to myself and I really, really struggled. I lived off campus. And so that made it even more, tough for me to connect. And I got on academic probation my first year. I almost dropped out and I thought about dropping out, right? And that's when I realized that I couldn't do it alone, that I needed support and I needed help. And I reached out and I remember going to Oasis, which is a program that helps first generation college students. And there, my life was changed. And I had another mentor, this time Miss Cecilia, and she is the one that told me, Liz, we need more people that look like you in those seats.
Oh, wow. So that was Miss Cecilia?
Miss Cecilia.
And she was over at Oasis?
Yes.
And was that a UCSD?
Yes, that was at UCSD.
Did you end up connecting with the community of, Latino students?
Yes, it actually was through Oasis that I was able to connect with that community. And I still have very, very strong relationships and friendships with those same friends. Together, we built our community, our, support network. And now it's amazing to see what everybody's doing with their lives as professionals and doing great work. And we continue to help each other.
Amazing. We just had an event here on Friday. It was the 3 law schools here in town, each of the La Raza groups from those schools. And I think, your experience really speaks to the importance of finding your community,
Right.
Wherever it may be, especially if you're in, law school or college or even in a professional setting, where maybe, there's not as many, people that you feel naturally connected with as you might like.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so important. To this day, I seek those mentors and also seek to mentor, right? Those that have been in my shoes, right? I think, as Latinos, that's our duty, right? To open up doors and if there's not a table for us, to create a table and pull up some chairs and bring other people with you.
It's funny, you probably know the figures, but I had all the kids out here, and some lawyers also, and it was a packed, courtroom, and I was like, talking about my experiences growing up. And then I was like, well, how many of you guys out here feel like you're a minority? And like some raise their hands. And then the point was I was trying to show them that times are changing here in California big time.
Yeah.
And so I showed them a slide that in 2015, Latinos surpassed whites as the leading population here in California. And then I asked the kids, what do you think that the percentage of Latinos in public school today that self-identify Latino Hispanic in California? So what do you think that is? You probably have some idea.
Oh my gosh.
Public schools.
Public schools.
In California, K through 12.
K through 12, let's say 75%.
Not quite, but like into the 60s.
Yeah.
And then, white is like very low.
Right.
And so, I think, so the work that you're doing is really for the new sort of population base of this state. Same with Arizona, same with New Mexico, same with Texas.
Right.
So talk to us about the work
Yeah.
that you're doing over there at the Chicano Federation?
Yeah, so Chicano Federation has been serving our community for 55 years. And we really started off as an advocacy organization in the 60s when there was a lot of attacks on the Latino community, right? And since then, we have transformed. We still do a lot of advocacy, but we also have affordable housing. We have 8 buildings of affordable housing. We have workforce development programs where we help anywhere from, women start their small business in childcare to really grow their business. We have a lot of child development programs. We have a preschool in Barrio Logan, and we continue to do advocacy on a daily basis.
Amazing. And so, you were talking about like been around since the 60s. Like that's like Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta. She was a guest, incidentally, on this podcast.
Amazing.
She came down here. Did you have heroes? Like you're kind of like them, right? Do you have heroes that you kind of look to historically for guidance?
Yeah, actually, you just named 2 of them, right? I grew up, hearing stories about Cesar Chavez. My grandparents were both farm workers and braceros. So were my tias. My dad also worked in the fields. And being in Imperial Valley, he's a big figure, right? And so is Dolores Huerta. My tia abuela actually, marched with Cesar Chavez, which is amazing. She's still with us today, and we'll share stories about that. And Dolores Huerta as well, right? And I've met with her a couple times, and to me, it's they are the heroes, but we all have a little bit of that hero within us, right? There's, even though times have changed from the 60s, there's still a lot of work to be done, and we still need to continue to advocate for our Latino community. And yeah, I'm just so thankful for all of the work that they did in our community that now I'm able to sit down and be a guest on your podcast because of that.
Yeah, amazing. I'm so glad you are here too. And so like your clients, that come into the Chicano Federation, we talked about housing. What about like food, or like what are they hoping to get help with from you guys?
Yeah, we have a resource center that we just opened up 2 years ago. And our resource center is a drop-in. Anybody can drop in, no questions asked about background or income or status. And it's really a safe space for community to come and see us with any of their needs. And so we often find that folks come in, the number one thing that they come in for is affordable housing, right? They come in needing housing, but after we sit down with them for a little bit, engage in conversation, they open up and they start to trust us. And then they disclose, well, I'm struggling with getting food on the table, or I'm struggling with getting childcare, or, having a livable wage. And what I love about our programming is that we're able to provide holistic support for our families in all areas that they're struggling with, not just the one that they came here to help, to receive help from. So whether we have the service in-house or we connect with trusted partners, we're there to help them. And I will say that law is the number 2 reason that people come see us, right? A lot of times it's immigration law, sometimes it's family law. And I think for us, what is so valuable is that folks can come to us and they trust us already. We have, a great reputation in the community. They know that whoever we connect them to, that they can trust, right? So I can say, hey, call up our friends, John Gomez and his firm. They're good people. And I think that that's what it's about. It's about making those connections with community and making our community feel safe.
Yeah, that's awesome work. And so are the people interacting with them, are they like called caseworkers, or what are they called?
Yeah, they have a variety of different names, right?
Yeah.
So we have some that, depending on their position, that they're promotoras. Their job is to be out there in communities. So they meet people at, Northgate Market or the Lavanderia, wherever the community is, to give resources. They all have their different, titles. For me, they're, my little angels doing the work.
Amazing. And so, I'm just curious, like, what percentage of your clients are coming in and speak Spanish as their primary language?
I would say at least half of them is their primary language. Although we are Chicano Federation, we do serve everyone that enters through our door. Our affordable housing, for example, I can share that the majority of folks that are housed through Chicano Federation are not Latino necessarily. We have a large population of refugee and immigrants that come from different parts of the world, but at least in the minimum, half of our clients speak Spanish, and it's their first, and for some, their only language.
Wow. And so people from different parts of the world, like where?
Yeah, so our affordable housing hosts a lot of folks from Afghanistan, from Syria, from the Republic of Congo. We have some folks from Cuba.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I guess I hadn't really thought about that. And you guys, your physical location is on University, right?
Yes, we have that's the majority of our staff, and then our affordable housing is throughout the county, mainly City Heights, South Park, and Barrio Logan, and our preschool is also in Barrio Logan.
And who's eligible to go to the preschool?
So for the preschool, that's a great question. It's based on income, and it's a free day, full day preschool. So we open up at 6:30 in the morning. We close at 5:30 p.m. And then we only close in federal holidays. So there's no 1 week off for spring, a couple weeks for summer. We're really open to the community and really want to make, an impact and help working families. I love our preschool, ages 3 to 5. If you need childcare, if you need a preschool, please visit us. We right now are currently enrolling students, and we also have a therapist on site, which is really unheard of, right? And our therapist is there to work not only with the little ones and any behavior issues that they might be struggling with, but also with the parents, and working as a team.
That's that long day for parents that have to work, and a lot of these parents, they don't get off all these holidays that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so to have that coverage and care and access to preschool, because a lot of kids don't get to go to preschool.
Right.
So that's a remarkable thing that you're providing.
Yeah.
So how long have you had this job?
So I've been with Chicano Federation for the last 2.5 years.
Oh, wow. And like people that are watching this on YouTube can see you, on our other channels. It's just audio, but you seem kind of young to be the big boss. Like, how does it feel like stepping into that job? How did you learn about the opening and say, hey, I want to take this job?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love sharing my story because I hope that it resonates, especially with some Latinas out there, right? So I heard of the position first by a recruiter. The recruiter reached out, sent me the job description. I read the email, but didn't respond. I was like, oh, that's not for me. I'm not there yet. And then another recruiter reached out to me for the same position. And then a community member reached out and said, hey, I want to have, I want to have coffee with you, or a margarita or something. I want to talk to you. So it ended up being a margarita. So it was over margaritas and chips. And we were having a conversation, and she said, "Hey, Liz, did you see that Chicano Federation, is looking for a new CEO?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I saw." And she's like, "I think you should put your name in the hat." And I was like, I thank you so much. I know you think highly of me, but I think I'm not there yet. Maybe in 7 to 10 years. Not yet. I'm too young, right? That's what I thought. And then, I looked and I said, wait a minute, let me think about this a little bit further. And I think for me, I was more scared of Chicano Federation landing in the hands of somebody that didn't connect with community and didn't treat our people with dignity and respect than I was afraid of failing, right? I grew up low income, first generation. My parents grew up very, very low income. And I thought about them and my familia and the type of leader that I would want to see giving them resources, right? And then I said, if not me, who, right? And so I was like, let me try it. Maybe it'll be good interview practice. And one interview turned into 2, 3, 4, 6 rounds of interviews, 6 months of interviews. And then they offered me the job. And coming in, I knew that I was going to work really hard. I knew that I wasn't going to have all the answers, but I also knew that I wasn't alone, right? And I knew that I had great relationships with other executives that are still really close friends that I can still call, on a daily basis and say, hey, I need help with this. And they're willing to do that. And I think that that's what we should do as a community, right? Is not to be afraid, to take maybe those risks, to show up and then to help each other out, right? So I've been very, very lucky to have built an amazing community that has been so supportive. And to me, it's a very personal job. I do think about my parents and my tias and my tios every day in the job. And I think that's what makes it easier, right? Because I am working really hard to provide a service for my own familia.
It's amazing. And so, by all accounts, you were up for the job, and I think, reviews and feedback and buzz in the community is you're doing an amazing job over there.
Thank you.
And so here we have this, a lot of maybe younger Latinos may have some self-doubt about ability to step into a big job like that. But thankfully, with the support of others, you were able to overcome that. And
right.
Based upon just thinking about you wanted to protect that baby, because it's really your baby. It's your people, it's your family. So is there a Chicano Federation out in the Imperial Valley?
We have some services in Imperial Valley. There are other organizations. And I remember when I first came on board, I actually met with a few leaders from Imperial Valley. They're like, Liz, bring more services over here. And I think that in the future, we might explore that, right? I do think that there's a need. For now, we're really concentrating in San Diego community. That's our number one. For me, it's really making sure that our services are deep and impactful before we go, wide and spread out. But yeah, that's definitely
there's plenty to do here.
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, being from there, if you're like, I wouldn't mind.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely wouldn't mind. To be determined opening an office over there in Imperial Valley.
Yeah, that'd be all right. And so how many clients, total does the Federation serve a year?
50,000.
50,000. That's such a large amount.
Yes.
And can you give us an idea about how many of those are like, families with kids,
Yeah. The majority are families with kids. We do serve individuals as well, but it's a very, very low percentage. I would say less than 10% is individuals, and the majority is families with young children.
Right. Yeah. And are you like, what does your day look like?
Yeah.
What does like an average week of the big boss look like?
Wow, I don't think that there's an average day, right? One day I can be, talking to a client or a tenant and having cafecito with them. And one day I can be on a podcast. Another day, I can be sitting down with a donor and asking for support, right? It really varies on a day to day. I think that's what I love about the job, right? Not one day is the same. I love being connected to community. And so often I, visit or connect with the communities we serve. I started a CEO advisory board that's made up of clients that we serve in our different programs. And so I hear from them on a frequent basis. I want to hear, what are their needs? How can we support them? And I tell them, this space is so that you can put me to work. And they do. They put me to work. And so every day is different. And I love it.
I wonder, well, that sounds like a pretty fun job. But, I know you're working a lot. I know you're a hard worker. Tell us a little bit, if you would, about, we just had some elections. Mm-hmm. And I imagine maybe your clients might have some response to or feelings about or worries. How are they all kind of reacting to the news?
Yeah, I mean, John, I think we could do a whole separate podcast to talk about the election, right? I will say that I'm really proud of my organization. Weeks before the election, we led a Get Out the Vote campaign, really just to educate our community to get out to vote. Nonpartisan, but we really wanted to encourage our families to get out and vote. And we were able to reach over 10,000 people through that amount of time. We partnered with 20 other organizations, nonprofit Latino serving organizations. And all of this happened within 2 weeks that we put together this coalition of partners. And for me, it was really thinking of, how do we keep our community safe, right? And so the reality is that there is a lot of fear for our families. We've heard it. What do I do if somebody knocks on my door? Am I safe to open up the door? And so one of the things that we're going to be working on is partnering, with attorneys to get, know your rights, materials and presentations, and continuing to advocate for our families. The day after the election, I met with all my staff. We have over 60 members on staff, and a lot of them are also, worried. They're worried for their clients. They're worried for their own families, for themselves. I have staff members that are of mixed status, their families are of mixed status, or I have family, staff members that are DACA recipients as well. So there is a lot of fear. And my commitment to them was that, we're going to continue to serve and do the work that we're doing. Regardless of who is in the office, our commitment is to, serve everyone, regardless of their background, right? And our commitment is to make our communities feel safe. So actually, tomorrow, I'm gathering another group of those 20 nonprofit organizations, and we're going to have these conversations. How do we keep our communities safe? Also, this weekend on Saturday, we had our Leadership Training Institute, which I relaunched after 20 years hiatus, to really develop Latino leaders. And they come from all sectors. So if you're listening and you're interested, I invite you to apply for our next cohort. But this curriculum, it's a 10-month curriculum to look at all of the Latino needs and the gaps in equity, right? And so we just this Saturday talked about education and the gaps in education. We have 30 fellows that are paired with a mentor, and we talk about, leadership and advocacy and health and education, policy, and then we develop capstone projects to help, our community. And so this Saturday morning when I addressed the 30 fellows, it was a different day, right? It was the first meeting since the election. And I told the fellows, this is why this program exists. We're building the new generation of leaders. And for us, we're not going to wait for a candidate to save us. We save us. We show up for our communities. We keep our communities safe. And so there's a lot of work to do, but our community's not alone. We have each other, and we need to work together to really protect our communities.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with that. What do you call it? Leadership Institute?
Yeah, the Leadership Training Institute.
Yeah, that's a good on you for bringing that back, because that's critical.
Yeah.
And the curriculum sounds like fascinating.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody, like if you want to make a difference, get your application in for next year. I think you already have your class this year, right?
Yes, our class this year will graduate in June.
Okay.
So come July, August, we will open up the application, and the next cohort will start in September.
And anyone can apply?
Anyone can apply.
Even like an old lawyer?
Even an old lawyer.
All right, good. All right, I'm in.
I expect to see your application, John.
I'm gonna get that application in, because I'm very interested in that. Like I actually before I went to law school, I worked as a social worker doing basically food stamps and AFTC down in Southeast, Spanish client base. Even back then, I was very interested in issues of community and poverty and access. And, that's really what it's about, right? I mean, more and more, that I get into my career, I'm more and more interested in institutional inequity, because that's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Right.
Like you were talking about, like with the junior college out there being impacted.
Yeah.
I would love to get my application in. And you don't have to say you'll let me in or not, but I'm going to apply.
I may know the CEO, so we'll see what we can do.
I love it. So, how can people learn more? Well, first of all, like, do you accept like volunteers? And like, we have all these like fired up La Raza kids, like.
Yes, absolutely. We have volunteer opportunities all the time. Actually, with the holidays right around the corner, we have a huge holiday drive. We're collecting toys and blankets. We're going to give out gift cards for shoes and groceries. And so you can host a bin for toys. I know that you are doing it, so thank you, John. And then, two, you can show up to volunteer. So to learn more, you can visit our website, ChicanoFederation.org, and you can sign up to volunteer. But we have volunteer opportunities throughout the year. Sometimes it's at our properties where we beautify our properties, do some painting and some gardening. And sometimes is, phone banking folks, encouraging them to vote. So the volunteer opportunities really, they vary, but we do have a lot of volunteer opportunities and ways that you can get engaged.
I love it. And you were talking about meeting with, community funders or people that support the organization. So I imagine that there's a need, right, for resources, i.e. money.
Right.
And so like to partner with the Federation on that.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, I think that's one of my biggest fear as a leader. With the new administration, 80% of our funding comes from state and federal funding. And a lot of it is from the Department of Education, which, Trump has threatened to close. And so that is a fear, right, of if we lose funding. And so more than ever, we are urging our community to support the work that we need to do, because now more than ever, our services are needed. So if you're interested, you can feel free to connect with me. Again, connect with us through our website, chicanofederation.org. And it doesn't have to be, the big $1,000, right? Every little donation, can make such an impact. We have a monthly giving program where, hey, if you say, hey, I'm not going to go to Starbucks for the week, and instead I'm going to donate, $25 a month, you can do that. And so a little goes a long way. We really stretch the support because it's so much needed.
And think about that, like, that missing latte or whatever, could be the difference of, a little boy or girl having preschool, or having shoes,
right.
Important stuff. And so, I know that we here at Gomez Trial Attorneys are interested in learning more, supporting more, working with you guys more, however we can, whether it be financially, volunteer, helping, I guess, with legal, access or questions. I know all of our colleagues at La Raza Lawyers are, and so, what, in sort of our, wrapping up here, what advice would you give to a young Latino, that has a heart for public service,
Yeah. I would say that your Latinidad is your superpower, right? And I think showing up to spaces as your authentic self. A lot of times when you're young and starting as a professional, folks give you advice like you fake it till you make it, or other things like that. And I really just say to show up as your true self, and don't be afraid to really show up as yourself, and don't hide who you are. Our community needs to see more leaders like us, and not just folks that, may look like us in brown skin, but really that represent the values of our community. So don't ever forget where you came from, and that you have really the power. You are who you've been waiting for, right? You have the power to build community and to make a difference for our community.
Totally agree. And thank you. I can't think of a better way to end our conversation here today. Again, this has been the Latino podcast, where we talk about the intersection of law and our Latino communities. We were so blessed today to have Liz Ramírez with us, who is a CEO and president of the Chicano Federation, like a really impactful organization here in San Diego. If you enjoy what you hear, please subscribe. Please tell others to listen, and please learn more about the Chicano Federation and support their mission of work. I know that we here at Gomez Trial Attorneys will. Thank you again, Liz.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Latino podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.